Maybe I need that thing. Maybe I need that thing too. This is a talk. It's also really exciting that you talk about the William Stout architecture books. I was the first one to work in the bookstore, and we had Lars Müller, the greatest book publisher for architecture, all over the place, and still do. And I'm glad to see that Matthias Schuler, my right hand in environmental, actually many of the projects here. But this is a talk that I gave at the Salk Institute in 2016, and I've been working on it as a possible book. And then this idea about architecture, I think that Lou Kahn states it the way I feel about it. And it's kind of outlined, so if we have this questions and answers, it'd be good for me to hear what you think about this as an outline for a book. I've been working on it for a year now. It's called Architecture Activating the Brain. Of course, light is a very important section here, which I'm going to focus on in this talk. But it's really, it's trying to connect, the basic scientific aspects to what I do and how we work. So it's divided into these different sections. And the first section really is connecting to Eric Kandel's work as a neuroscientist. And he's written a fantastic book about the brain and how it needs abstraction. I think this is the oops, they took it out. They took my slide out. Okay. All right. So I asked them to reduce this lecture because it was going to be 40 minutes instead of... Anyway, so Kandel talks about the notion that we need abstraction. The mind needs abstraction. That is, if you give the figuration, basically it's a top-down thought process. But with abstraction, it's a bottom-up process. And he talks about the 7,000 synaptic connections. When you think of there's over 100 billion neurons in the brain, the complexity is astonishing. This is really something I want to take on a little bit as an architect. And I made this drawing in Santorini, where you have this blue cobalt sea all around. You have this white Greek architecture. So I was thinking about the relation of the environment. Certainly when you're standing in Santorini, you feel differently than when you're in a cavern in New York. But then there's the relation of the body, for sure, the environment to the body, and directly there's a relation of the body to the brain. But then there's a dotted line around what I call mind. And I think it connects to things that Lou Kahn spoke about. And that is something we cannot scientifically analyze. And that's, one of the things that make me want to call this book Activating the Brain is that I always love this remark of Winston Churchill. We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. In 1944, he said that. And now we're finding scientific proof, neurobiological proof, and not only in a neurobiological sense, but in genetic sense. This book by Siddhartha Mukherjee, The Gene, is really a fantastic read, but what it brings to mind is that there is examples of environmental conditions that are making their imprint on genes, and a crucial fact that's passed on from one generation to the next generation. And that whole, I don't understand it, but it's called epigenetics, and it's a whole section of thought that we wouldn't know about maybe 15 years ago. When we begin our projects, we're always thinking about the idea that drives the design. But where does it come from? It comes from analogical thinking about architecture, about the site, about the circumstance, about the possibilities, and what I would call, again, in that dotted line around the mind, that it's a stochastic process. It can't be really analyzed. So we go from the world of concepts and propositions. There's a building I did, maybe my first important building, Chiasma, and it was realized. So the world of sensory experience, that's where it really has to happen. And that means that there can be an idea that's driving a design, but you really don't, someone can appreciate it without knowing what the idea is, because the world of sensory experience is where the architecture is really measured. So here's a few where you see this stochastic thinking, this intuition. This was a kind of first sketch that was made on the site at 4 a.m. in a hotel room overlooking the site in Helsinki. And it's the concept of intertwining, or chiasma, that was finally realized in the building. Some watercolors, I mean, that's a process, but always with watercolor, I can play with natural light. I can start to think right from the beginning a wash of light and how it comes into the space. So the geometry, the spatial projection, but also natural light is always part of the process. That's like 1993. That's a long time ago. This building is going to be 20 years old. Next May, we're going to do a celebration in Helsinki. Another museum of natural light is, and I just came from the 10th anniversary last weekend at the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City. It was an international competition where everyone was to build on the north side of the space, right here. That was the rules. And there were like many other competitors that just built right up against this. And I thought to break the rules and keep all sides of the building free and make, in a way, the opposite, the stone and the feathers. So this is a kind of analogical thinking, a kind of stochastic thinking. But then I said, the way we won is I said, look, I had the courage to break your rules because in your facade, it says the soul has greater need of the ideal than of the real. And that building is 10 years old today, and it's in beautiful shape. I'm very excited about it. If you have a chance to be in Kansas City, it's a wonderful place. It's free and open to the public. That means you can pass in and out of the sculpture gardens. There's a great Chiita show up there right now and a great Picasso show. But there was always the natural light from the first drawings and how it would work. And how it's a complex building. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm using this as just points. So this is the main section for today, of course. It's only one part of the book. And this is a quote from Levius Woods. Light is the main thing. Light is a natural phenomena, the complexities of which reveal the structure of human consciousness. Objects, including buildings, with their absorption and reflection of light, stimulate a human brain's neural networks, in effect, activating the brain. The more complex and nuanced the stimulation, the more fully the brain comes to life. And this is a very important section, and I sort of go back to my beginning in the West Coast. We were glad Herbert mentioned that, but I grew up on this body of water, Puget Sound, and this is my mother's house, bless her soul, but it was always about the sunrise, the moon, and this incredible body of water that I think, in a way, gave me the beginning. And in the Pacific Northwest, the sun gets very low in the wintertime, so the angle of the sun on that water was something very special. And my one building that I'm very proud of there is the Chapel of St. Ignatius. 7 bottles of light in a stone box, really bringing light as the key theme, but in the complementary contrast of colors that relate to the liturgical process. It's a complex idea, but I'm very proud to say that they have it on their website, so I don't have to explain it. You can go onto their website and understand it. Another project in the northern light in the northern hemisphere is the Knut Hamsun Museum, and this is a project that took 16 years to realize. I thought it would never happen because there was so much controversy, but we realized it finally in 2009. It opened, and that incredible light. This is above the Arctic Circle, so there's times when it's midnight sun for something like 6 weeks, but then the sun goes down around December 16th and doesn't come up again until February 1st. It's completely dark, but there's a kind of glow in the snow, a kind of pink horizon that comes, and people who, I've never been up there in this kind of dark moment, but they say, oh, you have to come, and it's really spiritual, it's soulful. So, but anyway, this is a project, I just have to say, architecture is not easy. I spent a lot of time defending this project, and I thought for sure, it would never be built. It was probably one of the most controversial, and they built a beer tap in a bar and served beer out of my building model, at that time. And they were like, so I was kind of the scapegoat of Norwegian culture for a long time. But it was in the mind of people. For example, a teacher in an elementary school sent her kids out to sketch vernacular buildings in the landscape, and they all came back with the Knut building. So I thought somehow, even if it doesn't get built, it's somehow there, it's part of it. But the great thing that happened was there was a man from Narvik that called sort of 5 years, this has been in a drawer, and said, we're going to build this building, I'm going to the parliament and get the money for it, and he did. And then it opened, so it was really a great moment. Another Scandinavian light is in Herning, Denmark, the Herning Museum, which is really we took the program, which was two boxes of a kind of permanent and temporary exhibition, and connected to Piero Manzoni, that great artist that worked there, thinking about the idea of fabric, because he worked in fabric. He was a fantastic artist and did a number of things. In fact, they have something like 63 pieces of Piero Manzoni. It's the largest collection of Piero Manzoni anywhere in Europe. So this idea that the sleeve-like element would bring light down very softly into the space. That was the center of the concept. Again, a kind of analogical thought. And that project has been 6 years now. And then in Glasgow, we said, how do we make this larger building than the Macintosh? Macintosh is, of course, the greatest architect that was ever produced in Glasgow, a wonderful building from 1904. So what we started with was we analyzed all the types of light in Macintosh's School of Art. And so our building really, revolved around art analysis. And one of the things that he had in his library were these driven voids, what we call driven voids that go all the way down. So we said, we'll make this kind of driven void of light. Now, not only is it of light, it's also the structure of the building. That's the concrete that holds up the floors. It's also the air. This building is super ventilated, naturally ventilated. So this sort of driven voids are working in every way to make this building a special place. We just opened on October 6th the Princeton Lewis Center for the Arts. It's a new quadrangle for the Princeton campus, and each building has its own conceptual strategy. First, there's the whole idea of a quadrangle, and then there's a forum below that, which has a kind of liquid light. But then dance is a thing within a thing, like these different departments have different materials, like a black box inside of a stone drum. And then the poetry and art section is about embedded, and the music building is about being suspended. So over the collective is suspended individual practice rooms on steel rods, and they're wooden boxes that makes them acoustically isolated. So this is from a few years ago, and this took us 10 years from the time we started it to this opening last week. And there you see a model from quite a few years ago where all the concrete structure will have this leche stone covering. But it's a building that really invites at night. This is the way when you go to Princeton from Manhattan now, this is how you will enter the campus. The Dinky Station is right to the right here. And then there's a huge pool that's over the forum. This is a public space of 8,000 square feet that wasn't in the program that we added. And it brings together all the different departments that are around it. So this has a kind of what I call liquid light, because these huge glass lenses in the bottom of the pond create a very, very beautiful light that comes down on that main floor of that floor. I think this is going to be a really spectacular space. And then the individual practice rooms suspended over the collective. In that building, the structure runs perpendicular, and then the practice rooms hang on these rods over the collective. So as you enter the campus, you can see down and you can see into the orchestral practice right there. So it becomes a building really about the arts and about bringing the arts to the forefront of Princeton's campus. Another building about light, very simple, small building, but I was just giving a talk there 2 weeks ago, and I took a couple more pictures. It's the Pratt School of Architecture in Brooklyn. And it was a simple idea of these two buildings were historic buildings, 1860 and 1855 or 1840, and bringing the floor plates through, and then making what I call a dissonant zone. And that's the addition with an auditorium. And at the top of it, there's a skylight that has a mixture of north light and south light, bringing the warm light and the cool light. A little building that we just finished last year, it's only 900 square feet. I would say that to students in the audience, I don't believe architecture has to be big. In fact, I want to work on smaller projects because we can get all the details. This is a project which is about the intersecting of four spheres. But you can see just a little time lapse of where the light moves in the space. It's a guest house, and it has no bedrooms. You know, real estate people say, well, how many bedrooms do you have? How many bathrooms? How many bedrooms? I said it has no bedrooms, 0. But it sleeps 5 very comfortably. Another section that I'm not going to go into in detail is what I call psychological space. But this goes back to when I was a student at the University of Washington, where the professors made all the students draw an 8 by 8 by 8 cube with everything that you need, your drawing board, your sleeping space, everything was packed into this little cube. That's a holdover from the late rationalists. And I made this is not the original drawing, but I made this drawing called Psychological Space, and I sort of defied their programmatic instruction. Luckily I passed, but they were not happy about it. And this is a section about negative capability. And I think if you're an American today, you have to have something that says what you reject in government. And I'll just read you, where this word came from. And this is about, about the future. What do we do? What about this, the future? And there was, we don't have answers, but we can ask questions. I remember reading a discussion between the poets Yeats and Rilke that took place while they were walking home after a poetry reading. The topic was the future, the way forward. They argued for over an hour and so came up with the term negative capability. This is briefly to take in all the negative aspects of the civilization around us and gather them inside oneself within the spirit and still make a creative contribution. As the poet Kenneth Rexroth said, against the ruin of the world, there is only one defense, the creative act. So there's a section called social condensers, and I'm very proud that all of these buildings have this kind of social space that's at the heart of them, that makes them a kind of special piece of architecture. For example, and this is, I won't read this. This is a little manifesto. What is a social condenser? It's really about making a building acting as a public space and bringing society together. And here's our little library at Hunters Point. It's a tiny little building. It's only 25,000 square feet, but it's right across from the UN where Oscar Niemeyer and Le Corbusier built the UN complex, and right across from Roosevelt Island where the FDR, Lucon's only building in Manhattan. So this is a wonderful site for a young architect like myself. It's a great chance to do something in Manhattan. It takes a long time to build something in Manhattan, and this has been going on for 10 years, but it's coming out of the ground now. You can see it's right at the base of all these commercial towers. These things are, in fact, a developer proposed to take over this site and give the library free of charge 3 floors in the bottom. And, Jamie Van Klemper, the politician in charge of this project, says, no, we want a public building. We want the expression of a public building. Thank God for him to understand. So this is going to be opening in March. Basically, it's a community library serving children, adults, and teens. And the facade is the structure. It's only 40 feet wide. There are no columns. And these cuts relate to the way that you move on the inside and the way you see Manhattan in the distance. There you can see the section where the main community room is here, and this whole space opens up as you come into the library. There's the children's room, there's the adults, teens reading room, there's a cafe on the roof that overlooks Manhattan. So the way the building was conceived was the idea of movement in the space and being able to look at Manhattan and be able to transform through the space at the same time. So as you go up this stair, you have these views of Manhattan, but on your right-hand side are the books. Now, we all know the library today is in jeopardy because of the whole digital world. So I said this building will be about a balance between the two. So everywhere there's books, as you see when you come in, there's computer desks behind them. So you don't see where they're actually working. They're working on their laptops, they're working on their iPhones, whatever. But you have this feeling of books. And then perpendicular to that is this terrific view of Manhattan going out into the distance. And these are old construction shots. It's coming together really quickly now. Well, not quickly, but at Manhattan public architecture speed, which is a snail pace. It goes very slow. And Lars Müller is doing a fantastic book just on the building about all the process that it's. And then when you approach it from the Queen's side, there's a reading garden, and you understand the three parts: the children's, the adults, and the teens. The sort of three main sections of the building. Another project nearing construction is the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. And this is a project where Einstein did his last years. So Einstein's office was right here. He was here for the last decade of his life doing his research. And it's a new building called the Rubenstein Commons. A great donor, David Rubenstein, is giving this as a place where all the scholars can meet. At present, there's a cafeteria that closes at 5 o'clock. If you come here from Japan on a Sunday afternoon, there's no place to get any food, there's no place to meet, and that's the purpose of the Rubenstein Commons. So the idea of the building is the interconnecting of science, the arts, and nature, this sort of notion of intertwining. And it's a very small campus. It's about 10 miles from Princeton University itself. So this is a very different institution. So going inside, you have this connection to nature. It's a very thin building, and the water gardens weave in and out, but then there's always light. And the notion of light, it's coming in from what I would call a space curve. I was trying to connect to Einstein's idea of time and space, curvature. So all the curves that make up the roofs are made out of curves intersecting curves. So these lines, for example, when you run a single curve and through another curve, you get this space curve. And the director said, "Oh yes, I love these ceilings. It's a place for our thought balloons to float up." And this also is open to the public. So this will be like the yellow in my plans is this kind of social condenser space. Nowadays, my young architects in my studio, they make these drawings that look like the building is built, and that's where we are today. It looks like it's built, and so I thought I'd better check and see if I could get some agreement from the past. And Korb was talking to Einstein, and I showed him the sketches, and they approved of the project. And this is in Richmond, Virginia. It's nearing completion, and it's a very important for that city because it's where the university meets the city of Richmond. And Richmond, Virginia is one of the most conservative cities in America, so for them to get a piece of modern architecture really is already shocking. And the idea, they wanted like 2 boxes of contemporary gallery. They have no collection, and I convinced them that they could have 4 galleries, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 vertical. And I made the analogy of art today is not a grand narrative like it was at the time of the Cubists or even at the time of the abstract expressionists in the 60s, and even in the 70s, where conceptual art was a kind of grand narrative. Now it's sort of diverse. So you have in art, you have someone like Bryce Martin, who's a terrific painter that just keeps painting. You have someone like Doug Atkin, who's a video artist that just keeps doing his video art, or Richard Serra, who's a sculptor that just does his. So in a certain sense, this idea of forking time in art, and that became the idea of a time, what I call the plane of the present, that the whole building revolves around. And then there's the intersection. This is the main intersection of Richmond, very busy intersection. So you have this vertical gallery and the horizontal auditorium, sort of in its kind of torsion. And that building was on the front page of the Richmond Times when the design was released, and I thought we were going to get blown out of the water, but there was no protests. It was amazing. And, you know, Richmond is all brick and neoclassical. It's a very conservative city. So I think it's the nature of this intersection also. There was a gas station over here. This was a vacant lot. They needed something at that intersection, and this building will provide, it has two entrances, one at the big busy intersection and one at the sculpture garden. So as you go around this building, it looks different from every side. There's that upper gallery, that vertical gallery with north light coming in. There's coming at the intersection, still under construction, and at the sculpture garden side, there'll be big ginkgo trees in this garden, and this water garden with pool and sculpture. Another art school, and I'm really proud to be working on these academic institutions dedicated to art, is at the Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is where Ben Franklin and Thurgood Marshall are the founders. Ben Franklin actually paid some early money years and years ago. So I had this first sketch I had was a kite in the trees, you know, like when Ben Franklin was trying to discover electricity, there was a rainy day and he had a key on a kite string. Then I thought that's a little too glib, and I looked at the site more carefully. There was a box that was there, and to try to lift the building up so that we could connect the park. There's a big park here to a new arts quadrangle to lift it up, and we had the idea of connecting to the trees, so the building will be lifted up. And these trees, these are the oldest things on campus. Some of these trees are like 4 feet in diameter. To take the diameter of the trees and make the diameter of the trees implode on the building and giving it this kind of floating kite-like shape, lift it up. And there you see the view through to the park. Art studios, a little auditorium in this section, connecting to the campus over here, and a shop for sculpture and heavy metal works. And I'm happy to say that the bids just came in yesterday, and it's on budget. So it's going to be starting construction soon. The Visual Arts Building at the University of Iowa, which is a building that we had to add on. This is the original building we did in 2007, which was cantilevered over the lagoon, and it was adding on to this building, but then there was a 500-year flood, and this building was wiped out. And they had another competition to do a building much bigger than the first one. So as an architect, one of the worst things that can happen is you have to build a building right next to one you did 10 years ago, because if you don't do it better, they say you started to lose it, right? You're not as good as you were 10 years ago. Scared the hell out of me, actually. So I worked on this project for like 6 months, the design. It was a very tight site, but it's big. It's like 280 feet on a side. It's kind of a square. And we had this one idea that I think what's really interesting is this a simple idea that there would be vertical porosity. That is, the light would come vertically down through this 280 feet by 200 feet, but then there would be a laminar section. That would be that the floors would slide against each other and therefore give that vertical porosity energy. And that's what, and then when you enter through, the dormitories are up here, so you walk through here, and then you're on the campus. So this building is almost like a passage, a stimulus, people walking through. And that's, I mean, this is an ugly drawing, but it really has the concept of what happens. You know, this notion of the laminar shift give you these balconies and this condition of let's say, social condensers around the stairs. So there's a kind of simple concept, but when you have a building that's 280 feet on a side, to bring light in natural light. And this building is like a gem of natural light. Every studio gets natural light. So it's one of those, in terms of this topic today, I'm very proud of and it's also built for $450 a square foot, very economical building. And there's the main, what I call social condenser space, where you walk down, you come down through from one end of the campus to the other. There's galleries, the students' galleries are there, so that the art school gets connected to the rest of the campus. And there's the day of the opening, last October. The president of the university said this was the most interesting building on the campus. In London, opening on the 10th of December, is our Maggie's Cancer Care Center. I was very honored to be chosen by Charles Jenks to do this will be the 11th Maggie's Cancer Care Center. And the idea of the building really is this notion of a thing within a thing, bamboo, a warm bamboo on the inside, a concrete structure, which is like a kind of bones, and then on the outside, trying to make the connection to what's on that site, which was Neum notation. That's at St. Bart's is the oldest hospital in London, and it's next to St. Bart's Cathedral, which goes back to Gregorian chant times, before the 5-line staff of music. They were making a thing called Neum notation. So I wanted to connect to the idea of color and music being something that this building could make a relation to. So we had a series of drawings from the 11th to the 13th century, and we made some, let's say, experiments, which came to be something really exciting because Oculux is making these special, it's like stained glass, but it's just a film between the inner and outer layer of Oculux that occupies that space. And you can see this building also was enormously controversial because it's right next to a James Gibbs building from 1743, a much larger building. By pulling it away, I could expose the coins. There was a 1950s building here, just a little brick box that was smack up against this 1743 building, and I pulled it away. And to make a long story short, we finally got permission to build it. There's a shot of the rendering of the bamboo that's being installed as we speak. There was a topping out where we had the bagpipes, and you have this relation of the outside, which is very, let's say, simple, and you don't see the colored glass. So it's only in the daytime where the light shines through, and you see it on the inside. But then on the nighttime, where the light shines from the inside to the outside, you see it on the outside. So it's a very exciting little project. It's only like 6,000 square feet. Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, under construction. This was a big competition. All the other architects were told to make a 7-story parking garage here, and there was an existing art school here, and this is the new Kinder Museum. The whole project is like $250 million. And when we made the competition, we told them they shouldn't build a parking garage. They should instead tear down their existing art school, build a new art school, and put the parking all underneath, so it's all connecting. So because it would be like a campus, and that we prevailed, we won, and it's an exciting project. But then they had to give us 2 buildings, so that took them another year to decide. And the actual museum building comes from the idea of clouds coming down, a kind of luminous canopy pushing down, and the light slides around on the inside. And there you see the whole complex. There's the Glassell School, the new Glassell School, and the Museum of... This is Mies van der Rohe's only museum in America, the 1924 Stone Building, 1958 and 1973, and then our building, which is under construction now. It has a kind of cold jacket. There are these tubes of glass. They're open at the top. So when the sun hits, it gets very hot there. So when the sun hits this building, by the chimney effect, it draws the air up the sides and reduces the solar gain by something like 90%. And there's this sort of open to the public social condenser space at the museum itself. And there's at the Glassell School. So we, doubled the size of their sculpture garden. When I made the presentation, I said it'll be a little bit bigger than the Dallas Sculpture Garden. So in Houston, that's a big deal to be bigger than Dallas. And there's a kind of forum space there for the students to show their work. And that's all made out of pieces of concrete, which are precast, and they are the supporting pieces as well as the wall. So that's the structure of the building. These are the structural planes, and then there's always operable windows and natural light in all the spaces. And in the main building, we're doing tests now for the clouds and how the light moves across that cloud shape. And we did a successful mock-up for the cold jacket, which is like the most nerve-wracking thing, because if we couldn't get this on budget, but we did, we got it on budget. You can see these are 30 inches in diameter, so the light from the inside will be glowing, but it also brings light to the second floor, and it allows this energy to be, the solar gain to be drawn out at the top. And my last project is in Malawi. I'm very happy that the Holcomb people were here today, and we talked about this project. It's a library, and it's part of a new campus. And it was a client that I had in Korea. I made an expensive house for the head of Daeang Shipping Company, and now, sort of 8 years later, he's decided to sell his shipping company, and he made the Miracle of Africa Foundation, which is a kind of exciting thing to be involved in. And I have to say that Matthias Schuler gave me the drawing how I started the project. I said, wow, I've never even been in Africa. What am I going to do? And they have a problem with no fuel. I mean, they're having deforestation because they burn the wood. So, and electricity, they have blackouts all the time. I said, look, it has to be maximum natural light and maximum solar energy. And that's how we came up with this. In fact, I should have put, if I'd known you were coming, I would have put your drawing in this lecture. And that's basically the idea of the building. The other idea is that in the field, in the savanna, that you get this sort of movement of grass, that it blows. And then you have orientation in the center of the library. That's almost Matthias's drawing, practically the drawing that he gave me, how the curve would work to get natural light and how the solar energy would provide 100% of the electric power. Not only that, we can provide several other buildings with this building, right? Like 3 other buildings. So this is supposed to start construction the 21st of March. Very exciting. And we've convinced them to do a dormitory so that it really will be the heart of the campus. It won't be completely books in the library. There'll be classrooms. So it's a big loft building, and there's already a lake there. And this is a photo montage of where the first site will be. And like I say, it was my first. I was going to end the talk, but I wanted to throw this in because Justin Russley and his office is here from Lucerne, and we just have one last week, and with Matthias's participation, the Doctors Without Borders International Headquarters in Geneva. So I'm very excited about that. These are solar walls that Matthias has developed. Matthias and I have developed. We actually worked on a different project, but then here it really works. And when I made the presentation, well, I said it's the colors of humanity. It summarizes the MSF action. And that's basically my talk. I would love criticism on whether this should be a book or not in this sort of 5 categories. And just to summarize also that my position really is that the science is important, and certainly today we have this measurement that we never had. Neuroscience is made incredible strides, but I'm still here with this dotted line in the intuition zone, where the spirit and the soul and the mind are working, certainly in a better concert that we can find scientifically, but somehow there's something, I would say, the stochastic thought process. Thank you.